In my last video, we discussed about the create operation and save sequences. In this video, we start with the update operations. Since update is linked with the read and lock as well, so we will implement read and lock as well. As you know, whenever we are updating the data, we have to make sure our ETAg field should not match. Should match, not should not. It should match. So we have to compare the existing ETAg with the database ETAg. So for that reason, we need the read operations, and we need obviously lock as well, because we want to lock the data before updating the data. In the create scenario, we don't need the lock and read because we are creating the new instance. But in update scenario, we will be needing the update, read and lock. Now, without wasting the time, let's jump into the system. Today we will do directly practical. We have already defined the create, update, delete, all the CRUD operation for our unmanaged behavior definition. But in the projection, we just uncommented the create. Since we are now implementing the update as well, so let me uncomment the update as well, and let me do Control F3. We have uncommented the update, but we have to write the code in the behavior pool. So you just click on control click, you will do, it will take you to the update method. Now we have to write the code in the update. We did last video in create. Similar way, just we have the different function module. Instead of the create, we have the update function module, and here we have to loop through the entities data. If you see the update interface, if you do F2, we are getting the entities data. Inside the entities data, we will be having all the information, what all are the things got updated in the control structure. So instead of writing line by line code, it's a very simple code like we did in the previous video. So what I will do, I will copy this code which I have already created, and I will explain. It's not a difficult code, that is the reason I am copy pasting. Then nothing much is there. So what we are doing, Shift F1. So what we are doing, we have this entities called in the importing parameter, as I told you, we have the entities. In the derive type, if you see, we have all the data, and along with the control structure which got changed. We are looping through these entities like we did in the travel. We are preparing the input field. We are calling, in this case, instead of calling the create, we are calling the update field, and here we are passing two things. One is the travel ID, travel detail, and second is which all are the field got changed. Those detail I am passing in the ls travel x. So those both the details available in our entities importing parameter. The first thing what I did, I got the, like we did in last video as well. In create, we just got the data from the update mapping from entity. Means we will get the entity mapping, we will refer, because both the types are different. If you see F2 over here, we have the travel ID, agency ID and everything without space. But if you do in the importing parameter of entities, but if our declaration of in this, which we declared the type travel of this one, in this one we have underscore, and that mapping we already defined in the behavior definition. Now we are mapping all the field back to the LC travel in. Once we have done, since we have to pass this data, if you see the ls travel x, this is again the structure is already there. I'm utilizing this structure. In your case, if it is not available, you have to create this structure where we have the key field as a travel ID and non-key other fields as a boolean. If you see this intx, its include is there. If you control click over here, all other fields are as a boolean type. And I think, give me 1 second. So we have referred the same structure here as well. You can see, and same structure type we have declared in the we have to create. If in our case I'm using directly demo environment, this one. So I used in the behavior definition as well, and I'm using here as well. In your case, you might have to create new one. If you have different kind of requirement, you have to create the structure, control structure. Each field should be type of the, if you see F2 here, Boolean type should be there. Each and every field type should be Boolean apart from your primary key. Primary key I'm getting from this update structure. Other detail which got changed, that I'm getting from the control structure of the travel update. Mapping from entity I'm using again, and if you see F2, so we have the control structure, and you can see based on the type it will automatically map the data. When the corresponding will map the data, it will not only see the name, it will see the type as well. So it will map only the, even we have the same name here, travel ID, and inside the control structure we have the travel ID, but since this is the type of ABAP behavior flag, and we required in our target structure also ABAP behavior flag type or Boolean type, so corresponding data will be mapped. One important thing I want to tell, in the update or create operation we use the using control. Here we didn't use the using control. The difference between the using control only pass the data which got changed in ls travel in. Suppose you are creating new travel instance, what all are the data you have filled in the front end, or those data will be passed in ls travel in. Blank data will be not mapped to the using the corresponding field. Here we are not using corresponding, we need all the data. Because using control we are not using, we need all the data based on this mapping we have defined from this entity. So this is the basic difference. Mapping from entity will use to map data accordingly, your behavior definition, whatever you define, it will map accordingly that. And using control only transfer the data which got changed, where the control structure having the flag. In this case we are passing entire control structure from this particular update to the int x. This is the basic difference, and we are calling the as usual function module, and map messages we have used the same map messages. But in this case we will be having the CID reference ID, obviously, because it's update operation we did in the manage scenario also. So if you remember, that was happening automatically, we didn't do in manage scenario, sorry. So in this case, if you see, I just want to show you, if you see the derived tab, we have the CID reference field. So CID reference field, as I told you, it will be useful when we are creating the child entity with reference to the parent entity. In that case we will be useful. If we have the CID reference field, you can fill it, and we need to pass mandatorily here travel ID in mapping messages. In map messages, as of now, if you see this code, if you control click, we just have mapped back based on the message type, we have mapped this CID, but in this case we will be not having the CID. In this case we will be having the travel ID, because CID will be available only when till that point the travel ID is not available. Now we have the travel ID because we are doing the update, not the create. In this case we will be having the travel ID instead of the CID field. So for that, what we have to do, we have to add in our map message one more field called the travel ID, and which we have to pass here, and we have to modify this map message structure as well. Okay, so this should be importing parameter after I can define after the CID. So you can see travel ID, or I can do one more thing. Let me go there. Can I define like this? Let me see using control 1. I'm not sure, but let me see map messages. Let me do control 1. Oh, rename is coming, but I'm not able to define. Control C. No need to worry. Just I will go up and I will define this travel ID here. That should be type of demo travel ID, demo travel ID field, because travel underscore ID, we have the ID field. it will be, and we have to make Control C. Now what we have to do, we have to pass this travel ID as well. Okay, we go down. Okay, what I can do, last modification place I can go, I have passed the travel ID, and it should not give me error because of the travel ID. I have to make travel ID as a optional. So let me make it a optional, because I'm not passing travel ID in the create scenario. So that is the reason. So that's now fine. So let me go a little bit up again. So we have passed the travel ID, and let me activate Control F3, and we have to modify the map messages method as well. Let me click on Control click, and this time we will have to pass here travel ID. To do that, what we will do, we will enter, and we will see what all are the values are there. Travel ID will be there, I think so. Okay, so we are appending, so we will be not able to see here because we are appending the value. If you see failed structure, Control Z, let me do F2, DT failed. Oh, no information available. F2, it will be available runtime, but if you do here F2, you will get to know in the failed structure F2. And we have the travel ID field as well. Control C, we have to fill this field. Control V, and that should come from our travel underscore ID. And same thing we have to pass Control C here as well. We have passed the CID, we have to pass the travel ID as well. Control V. And we can make the CID as also as a optional. Sometime we will be not having CID as well, so we have to make as a optional, and we will be not able to pass the CID when we do the delete operations at that time, or some other operations, actions and all. So that is the how we have to change the map messages. And let me go back to my method. Let me activate this one, Control F3, and let me see how my update is working. To see how update operation is working, I have put the breakpoint on my update function module. So I put the breakpoint on the update. I have already breakpoint on create. Not only that, the two important method, as I told you during the update, one is we having the read, there also I have put the breakpoint, and one we are having as a log, there also I have put the breakpoint, to see that how it is triggering and how it is impacting our update operation. So let me go to my service binding, double click over there, select my travel root entity, and click on preview button. And we can see the data is now getting displayed. One important thing I want to tell, when you click here on go button, it will not fetch the data from the read method. You can see I have put breakpoint on the read also. If I go to the debugger, it's calling first get global authorization method to check the authorization. Let me do F8, but it didn't call any read method. Even I have put breakpoint on read method, it is not calling the read. Basically, whenever you click on go button, it will not get data through the read method. Instead of, it will hit the database table directly, it get the data from the database. Read operation only used when we need to read the data from the transactional buffer. So that is very important thing. So the read operation is created only for if you want to read the data from the transactional buffer instead of you want to read the data from the database. That's a very important thing. And in today's session, we will be seeing how it is we will be seeing that how it will be reading from the transactional buffer and how it is reading from the database. Currently we see the read method didn't trigger, so it is read from the database. So let me click on my first travel instance or any travel instance. It will check each time authorization. Obviously, let me do F8 and come back. Click on edit button. I will show you one more thing important. If you click on inspect and go to the network tab, each time whenever we are doing any operation, let me go to the network tab, and I have already filtered on OData request is. As soon as click on I edit button, you can see the $base request got called. If you see this $base request and if you see the payload header, you already know we simply calling this particular service. I am sure you are not able to see this. Let me do one thing, or let me detach this one. Okay, so you can see this. Apart from this, you can see the $base request also. You can see this one is the $base request got called, and 202 means accepted, and base how it will work, we will send our URL in the payload, URI in the payload. You can see we send this URI to get the travel status value help. This is doing the framework for you. So since we have defined the value help for the travel status, so it's getting the value help for your travel status, so it can give you easily help instead of triggering because it is drop down button. That is the reason. Apart from that, this is the first $base call happen. Let me modify something. Let me modify description, vacation RAM. Let me put currently in the database it is the vacation, and let me click on save. As soon as I click on save, let me see first my one more $base got triggered. That is basically again the $base request, and if you see in the payload, it is having the merge request. So merge basically it will do the update. It's same like put will do entire data change, but merge will do the only the particular field code change. Then it will call the merge request, and you can see we have other detail as well. Let me go to the debugger now. First it will check the authorization. Let me do F8. It got called the lock. You can see the now lock method is triggering during the update operations. Because in the update operation, what we will do usually, before updating the data, we read the data from database, we log that data, then we update the data, then we will unlock the data back. So that is the reason you can see we already have the data from the database and it is trying to log the data. We didn't put any lock. So if you don't put any lock and your SAP SAP logs will be not logged in the log table, and some other guy, if he is updating the data, he will be able to update data through the any report program or any Fiori application or anywhere if you are working on the on-premise system or private cloud. So that can happen. So you have to make sure you are locking that also we will implement today. And let me do F8 again. Now it will trigger my update method. Inside the update method, we are looping through entities, and if you see the entities, this one only which field got changed. Let me open here. This is having only one line, and if you see that only the one field got changed, vacation RAM. So that is the reason only changed field we are getting in the entities. That is very important thing. And we are looping through this entities table which is having only one entry. Other fields are blank apart from the primary key fields. The travel ID will be there obviously, and which field you are changing in front end, those detail will be there. So as I'm looping through that table, I map the data back to the ls travel in which I have to pass in the function module. So if you see this one, if you double click over this, you can see the data, you have travel ID, and one field only we have changed, that is the vacation RAM. That also you can see. Then we have to fill the ls travel x structure also. In this structure currently it is blank, we didn't pass anything, so it is having the travel ID field and other field in form of the boolean, or we can see it will be having the flag, which field got changed. So let me do F6. We pass the travel ID and we pass the what all are the field got changed, that got filled here. In this case only one field got changed, that is called the description, and which we are getting from this control structure of this one. One more thing, as I told you, we are mapping from here. If you see in the travel update entity, the field name is the memo, and in our travel table the field name is the in the travel table the field name is the memo, and in our travel entity the field name is the description. That if you open the behavior definition and you see, we have mapped memo with the description, so that you have to make sure. So let me go to my current statement where I am debugging. You can come from here from your stick, and I am calling here update function module. I can debug this function module and show you. Basically it is updating the table, it is updating the transactional buffer basically, and during the save sequence, which will trigger now, there it will take the data from the transactional buffer and it will save the data. Before updating data, it is doing a lot of things. It will doing the validation, it is updating the admin fields. Let me show you some of the things so you will be familiar. Apart in real time, this in real time in your case, that might be the other function module which is doing your update. Any code that will be the completely ABAP code which is written here, which is updating your model, data model, whichever you are creating. In this case we are calling for the travel update, so it will update the demo travel table. So let me show you. It's okay if I would have not shown you also, that is also fine, but let me show you quickly. So it is basically we have that demo flight legacy class which is having all the code to do the card operation on the travel booking and booking supplement. So one of the method it got called, we can see update travel. Instead of create table, it got called, okay, let me do F5, it called the update travel. In this case it is checking there should be travel ID if you are updating something, and it is getting the travel X structure and passing back that data. And this time the action code, we are calling the same method CUD preparation, which we have called in our create method as well, create implementation. This time we are just updating instead of passing the create here, we are updating the update. That is the only difference. And if I do F5, it will call the update method. It will check if you didn't initiate it already, it will initiate and it will call the travel update. Here we are dividing the data. For the create operation we have filled the data in the travel. For update we have filled the data in update, and for delete we have, in our case we are doing the, if I do F8 we are doing the update, so only we will be having data in the update table, travel update. And if you see the create and delete, we don't have any data, only we are doing update. That is the reason we are having the data in this LT. So create operation will not work in case because this LT travels is blank. Let me do F6. In our case the update will work, and again it's having the code to update the data in the demo travel. Let me show you a little bit. It will take 5 minute time or 2-3 minutes. Let me do F5, F5, F5. So it's checking the check the empty keys, if you should have travel key or at least, and it is getting the data from the database as well. If you don't have data, if you see to see the entire data, because ultimately it have to update the data and compare the data. So it's getting the data from the demo travel as well, and it is looping through that data which we got from this interface. In this case we have only one. If you open this one LT structure, and if you open this we have one entry, and if you open this we have only one key field, and we have only one field code which got changed description. So this is looping through that data, and other validation, buffer validation is doing, and once the validation is done, it is looping through all the fields, and one by one field, all the fields checking from the buffer, and whatever it got from database, if something is mismatching, that updating in particular field, it updating old in the new field, whatever the values are there, it is updating. And finally once everything is done, it is checking the data. Basically the validation is called, then it is updating the admin field, and once the admin field got updated, here it updated the buffer2 table, and finally it is updating the data in the ET travel. Let me come back from that. ET travel means it is sending back the data to the, let me do F7. And once we got the data back from here, we got the data LT travel and LT message. We are checking that we are passing that LT travel data to ET travel. Let me do F7 one more time. Once it is done, there are other things are happening. If you are doing booking, if you are doing booking supplement, those all things are there happening. And finally everything is done. They are saving the data from the LT buffer to table to the LT buffer, that it is happening. If you didn't get any error. Let me put this breakpoint. Let me do F8. I didn't explain line by line. If you are interested, you can go through the code and you can see, but thoroughly I have explained. In this case, they are doing for travel CUD or copy. So basically, if you go inside the method, it will copy the data from buffer to table to the main buffer, like in the same way we did in the create operation. So they are clearing the buffer too, and they updated the data empty. If I will come here, breakpoint, and do F8, so if you see the empty buffer1 table, empty create buffer, empty update buffer is having one entry because we are updated. Empty delete buffer, there will be no entry. Empty delete buffer, there will be no entry, but you will be having the entry only in the empty update buffer. And whatever we are having in a buffer2 entry, that update we will clear now because it is not needed, because we have filled the main buffer empty update buffer. Let me do F5, come back from this method. Let me do F7. It will come back, it will return all the messages, it will map the messages, and we will come back to our main update operation where we have called this particular function module. Again, it will happen for the delete as well. So I will not explain that time, but just you can go through the code and you will see what it is happening. Basically, it is updating the data, and if something goes wrong, it is updating the message. In this case, nothing got wrong. It will update the message, and message this time, if you see, CID reference is blank, but we have the travel ID. So that is the reason travel ID field we should send, and CID reference field will be blank obviously, and the travel ID, because we have already created the travel, that is the reason we have to send the travel in this map message. And if you do F5, in this case we don't have any message. It will not, neither it will fill the failed or nor it will fill the reported. And we will come back to our map, and like that this update operation is done. If I do update F8 now, it will call the adjust number. It called the save sequence. I explained the save sequence in my last video, but in this case, since we are not creating the new travel, so this mapping table, all the internal table will be blank, nothing created newly. So there will be no impact of this adjust number method during update and delete. Even if you do F6, and you will not get any data from this, because in the buffer, in create buffer for the travel, booking and booking supplement, everything is blank. So that is the reason we are getting no data. So mapping, again, we will be not gonna fill in adjustment number, because during the create operation we already mapped and created the late numbering during the save sequence. Let me do F8. Now it will trigger the save sequence. Basically, take the data from the buffer table, and if I go inside, and it will update the data in the database. That also I have shown you in the create operation. Let me quickly show you. Let me do F7, F5, and you can see this is calling basically the save method for travel local class, and it is checking that buffer2 is initial, because that is temporary buffer, should not have any data. And in your main buffer, if you see, empty update buffer is having this one entry. So you can see here as well, and I think here as well, empty update buffer one entry. Create and delete will be not having entry, because we are not doing it. It will update this particular demo table. Let me do F8, and finally it will call this initialize method also to clear the data through this particular function module, and it will clear the main buffer as well, because we have already updated data in the database. Let me do F8. Let me come back here. So you can see data is updated. If you go in table and see also that data also, you can see it got updated vacation RAM for this travel ID. Let me show you that also. Controls, what I will do, I can go here and I can open this travel table, demo travel. Let me do F8. Let me go to the ABAP perspective, and if you see the travel one, I can't see the travel one. You can see the travel one and come right side here. You can see it got updated vacation RAM. It was previously vacation. It got updated in the database. But you can see my lock method got triggered, but read method never got triggered till now. The read, because we are not reading the database from the transactional buffer, and we don't need to read as well till now, because in our projection, what we can see, we are not using the ETAg. Where as soon as you use the ETAg, that time you will be need that particular data from the transactional buffer. Why you will need? You want to compare the ETAg value from the transactional buffer, which is saved data, and whatever available on the database, you want to compare the ETAg values, because you are using the ETAg. The SAP framework try to get the data from the transactional buffer. When it will try to get the data from transactional buffer, it will trigger the read operation. Then it will read the data, and it will read the data from the database also, compare the ETAg value. If it is matching, then only it will update. If it is not matching, it will give runtime error. You can't do this update, or it will give the error. So let me use the ETAg first here, and how the read operation is triggering, let me show you. Then we will implement the read operation as well. So let me activate my transactional buffer. Anyway, in my base BO we are already using ETAg, but in the projection BO we are not using. I have activated this one. Let me close this one, and again run my service. I would have refresh also, that is fine, you can refresh. Let me preview my application. Now I have used the ETAg operations. So again we will go through, we have all the breakpoint in place, even in the read method as well. So we'll see what all are the methods are triggering. Let me click on go button. It will read the data from the database. No read method will trigger, but authority check method will trigger. Obviously it will check the authority you are having or not. Let me do F8, and got terminated, and we got the data from the database. We didn't got the data from the transactional buffer. Let me go inside, and again authority got triggered. Let me do F8, and parallelly, if you want to see how the $H is triggering, that also you can see. It will be very interesting for you guys also. Each time how the backend call is happening, every time the batch request is how we are requesting data from the each time from backend. So this is happening internally, but you are interested, that also you can see in the developer tool. Let me click on edit button. As soon as you click on edit button, this value help will be called for the travel status, and it will get all the 3 values, which will be shown here in drop down. Now let me update something else. You can update any field, not only comment. You can update end date, you can update anything apart from the primary key fields. Let me click on save button now. This time little bit different, because you have implemented the ETAg. Global authorization is triggered. Let me do F8. Log got triggered. Let me do F8. Read got triggered. You can see read method got triggered. In previously, when you are not using the ETAg, the read never got triggered. Now through this read method, your framework is trying to read the data from the database which you have updated, and from that it is evaluate the last change or ETAg value which you got previously. And if I do F5, in this case it got failed. So it will try to, once it got the read the data, it will try to check the ETAg. So read and check the ETAg. This is the internal things. We didn't do anything. That is the SAP framework method is calling. They're trying to, they read the data from the database. They read the data now just from your read operation, but we didn't define any read operation. What will happen, we will see. If I do F6, it will basically it will dump. Obviously it will try to read the data. ETAg check will happen. You can see it is checking the ETAg. Inside this, if you go inside, because we don't have any data, it will try to compare the data and try to check the ETAg. You can go through the method. It is again the standard compare ETAg values are there. Let me do a F8. I know it will get failed, it will not come to this. Let me put one breakpoint here and let me do F8. It never come to here. In between it got failed because obviously we define the ETAg and the runtime error got happen. You can, in the corner you can see the you can go and click on debug button and it will take you to where exactly it got failed, and you can find out what is the issue in your dump. But as of now I know already what is the issue, because of I didn't implemented read operation. That is the reason it is getting failed. Now let's go and implement the read operation. To implement the read operations, let me come to the ABAP perspective back. Let me close this class which is not needed. Now we have to update the read operation as well, which should read the data from the transactional buffer. Basically it should read the data through the function module, which is already available in that function group which I have shown you in my previous video as well. For that also, again, I don't want to write very simple code. Just you can copy and we can see this is for the read or update. I think this is for update. We have for read also we have some code. I already copied previously, so let me copy this one. Very simple code, you can go through. I don't want to again one line by line, it will take much time. I just want to explain the concepts, that's very important for me. So in this case, again, whenever you are reading the data, you will get the keys. So which data you want to read? Keys based on your database data which you have read already. Based on that, those keys will be filled. Or for those keys, you have to read the data from the transactional buffer through this function module. And if you are facing any error, then you will have to fill this LT message. And again, the same thing. In this case, the travel ID we have to pass, and we have to pass the travel ID, and we have to pass the, if something got failed, then we have to say pass the failed edit and all the things, same thing which we have done in the create and update as well. And we have to pass the failed and reported structure. And if the LT messages, we have the data and we have to loop through data. This is happening in the map message, and it will fill basically those two, failed and reported structure. If we successfully read the data, then the data will be available, and we can in the LT travel out, that will be here, LS travel out basically, and that data you can pass back to this particular result. So like that it is happening. If you see the read method, the interface, if you do alt back, you will be having only keys. If you do F2, not F3, I did alt back, I did F3, let me do F2, you will be having the keys. You will be having the result where you have to keys, you only have the key fields. You see, only you have the key fields. In our case it is the travel ID, and we have the transactional key we have to use. And other case, in this case we have the result. We have to send the whatever the data you have read the data, basically it will be the travel data obviously, and if something goes wrong, you have to fill the failed and reported. So same thing I did, nothing much. I want to show you how it is happening, that is the reason. Let me do Control F3 and let me do the breakpoint as well. Okay, oh, it's telling some you how much breakpoints are there. Let me remove some of the breakpoints. To remove the breakpoint, you can go to the debug perspective and you can select what all are the breakpoints is not needed, and you can right click on that and remove those breakpoints. Okay, like that we can do. In this case, let me switch back to the ABAP perspective and let me put breakpoint now. Let me see all the breakpoints we have or not. In get authority we have, get global authorization we have, create we have, update we have, and delete we don't need, and read we have in this time, and save sequence. Let me put the breakpoint on read, and apart from that, map messages we don't need any breakpoint. And let me go to the my save sequence class also, which will be, we can traverse from here. It is, if it is not already open, and let me go to the local types. So we have 4 methods. Finalize is there, and adjust number is there, and one more method. Let's put the cleanup also there. These all the breakpoints are already there. So let me re-trigger now, because we have implemented the read operations without wasting the time. Let me come back and refresh my application to see how all the things are triggering. Obviously on the go it will not trigger any read method will not trigger, but the authority check method will trigger. Obviously you can go to here directly, and the variables, again you come to here. I think I have already. Let me do F8. Okay, so what happened, I'm not sure. Okay, one second, there is two debugger now. Let me close this debugger, terminate and disconnect all. I don't want, okay, it got terminated. So let me refresh again. Basically, oh, I got the data. Let me click on go button again. Now it will trigger first the global authorization method. Let me do F8. It got terminated, and let me click on one of the things I want to change, because I want to see the ETAg how it is reading. And let me do F8. Again I can see the edit method. This time let me right click and go to inspect and go to the network tab to see all the $batch request, and OData is there. Let me click on edit button, and this time if you see $batch already got called for the getting the value help. Let me change something, Technomaniac. Okay, let me click on save and see what $batch got triggered. If you see this one, this time it got triggered for the update, merging the thing again, this time merging this particular field, and this is the $batch. And again you can see one more thing I want to see. You can see this time it passed the if match field. So currently whatever the data which is having that particular ETAg field, that ETAg field it got passed. So let me see again back, and let me see this time what it is. First it will call the authorization, then it will call the lock we didn't implement it, that also we have to implement. Let me do F8. But you can see read method got called. It already read the data. I don't have any breakpoint, so that is the reason already read the data. So if you see in the out of this one, I will show you debug also. I will put the breakpoint, but you can see it successfully read the data based on this particular travel ID. Let me put breakpoint again here. Let me do shift F12. Let me do F5 again. If you see the keys, only the key value will be there. Travel ID is there and control structure is there. But if you open the control structure, only the one field is there in control structure, the travel ID 01. Other fields or last change is 8 also, it is got changed because we are doing the ETAg, that is the reason. The last change 8 field also there. So let me do F5, and it got called the basically read method will call. If you see that travel read, and it will call the again the flight legacy message, and you can go through this basically in this particular class method it will read the data from the buffer and queue back. I don't want to go through in detail, you just go through that how it is doing. This is the existing code. And the map message, it is again mapping the travel ID. We didn't get any error message, and that is the reason the failed travel and reported travel also not got filled. And let me do F8, and let me do F8. It got filled the return message, and once it is done, this time it got failed again. Okay, close again. Let me refresh again. Why it got failed, I have to check. And let me update something else. It called the authority check. Let me do F8. And let me come back here. Let me edit. I think something got wrong, or I refresh not happen. Let me click on save. Let me come here. Let me do F8, or I read the data. Let me do F8. update will trigger here. After reading, update is triggering now. Previously update method was not triggered, and now adjust number is triggered. F8, F8, F8. I think I didn't refresh the application, that is the reason. And this time the ETAg got matched and we got the database successfully, you can see. So last time I think application got not refreshed, it is taking the values from the cache. So now ETAg got matched and we are able to save the data. If you open parallelly two sessions, in one session you will change, the second session you will get the error, the ETAg value is not matching, so you go and update the ETAg. So those kind of things will happen. You have to handle those things your own, because it's a unmanaged scenario. You have to do the read operation from the database, otherwise you will get the dump. Now we will go and implement our lock operation as well. To implement the lock object, or what we can say this lock method, we need the one lock object obviously, that we will usually create in the DDIC base SE11, but we don't have here SE11. I already explained how to create this lock object and how to work with this lock object in Eclipse in my one of the series called the SAP LUW, database LUW, SAP logs, database log. I explain in the detail. You just have to right click on your package and create new other ABAP repository object, and you have to search for the lock object and you have to click on the lock object, and you have to give the detail of your lock object description, and it will ask other detail. But in this case I already have one lock object. SAP standard lock object is already available, demo ETravel. Basically once you give that lock object name and description, this screen will appear. You have to pass here the which table you want to get the data, what all are the fields, what is the lock parameters, those all the detail like we usually pass in the SE11. The same way we have to pass here as well. So what kind of lock you want to perform, in this case it is the write lock. And once you activate this one, this two method ENQUEue and DQ function module will be generated automatically. And this is how the lock object, how to create the lock object. If you want to see, I will give the description in the link, that you can see how we can work with the lock object in the Eclipse. But one more important thing here, since we are working on the BTP trial account, or if you are working on the SAP public cloud, not on private, I'm talking about the public cloud, that time you can't call this function module directly in your method, lock method. Why you can't call? If you try to see this particular function module, let me open this one, Control Shift A, ENQUEue or DQ function module. Let me open this ENQUEue ETravel function module. And if you see the properties of this particular function module, you have to go to the specific properties, or no, not as specific, you have to see the API state. Neither it is C0 released nor it is C1 released. You can't use this one in your cloud or BTP environment. And one more thing you can see, if you go to the C1, here come at least somewhere in the transport, API state is not released. Obviously if it is not released, you will be not able to call this function module directly in your lock method. Let me try to call, Control C and go to my class ZBP travel techchem, and let me call this function module, call function, Control space, and let me pass this function module, Control V, Control space. I'm not getting the help first, and let me do one thing. If I see the error message here, the use of function ENQUEue is not permitted. This particular function is not permitted here. Why it is not permitted? Because you are working with the cloud environment. Either you are working in BTP or cloud. And if you are working in the on-premise system or private cloud, there also you can't use this particular function module if you are language version, or if you are specified your, one second, In this case we can't see. Give me 1 second. Application component, give me see one more thing. Give me 1 second, let me see the properties of this one, because let me open this one and see the properties. You can see this package is developed for the ABAP for cloud development. So what all are the objects you are developing inside this package, those all should be compatible with the cloud development or BTP development, you can say, but you can't create anything which is not supported in the cloud. So that is the reason you can't call this function module directly. Then what we have to do, how to lock now our this particular trouble. So for that purpose, SAP already provided us the release API, something called the release API, that we can use here. So in this case, we will be gonna use one of the famous release API which we have to use for the locking our object. So in this case, let me create the object LR lock object, and we have to call one of the famous release API called CL underscore ABAP underscore lock. That is the class API, CL underscore ABAP underscore lock object factory. Shift enter you have to do, and you have to call the static method of this one called get instance. In this get instant method, you have to pass your particular lock object name. Control C, let me go to last editing location, and you have to pass here your lock object name, and you have to close this one. Shift F1. This is how you will get the instance of your lock object. To lock the data, first let me fix this warning. You have to do control 1. It is asking for the try case block, so you can do surround by try case block and shift enter, and CX ABAP lock failure. There is something got log. You are not able to get the object of this particular thing, this particular object. Then you have to write. You have to handle this catch exception and LO underscore lock fail, something like that. You can create the object, and in this case I will raise sort dump using control C, and you can pass this object name. Shift F1 and control F3, or you can handle error message also, but in this case better to give the sort dump because you are not able to log the entries, and how you will further you will go. That is the reason. Once we got the object, now using this object I can call ENQUEUE method. So you can see I want to call the ENQUEUE method. Shift enter, and here you can pass whatever the parameter which you used to pass during your function module call. Ultimately, if you go inside this particular method, if I do control click and go inside this particular class and in particular method, it is getting all the parameter data whatever you have passed, and ultimately it is calling that particular function module only, but in the different way. It's not directly calling that function module. It is calling to the dynamic programming and passing all the function modules and exception, and those all handle, and this is again the released by SAP, so there is no issue. So this is how, whenever we have to use the lock function module, you have to, instead of using the unreleased object, and you can't use, and even you are working on the on-premise system and your version 2020 and onwards, I think this one is available, you have to call your lock object using this class only if you are working in the lower version also, because in future if they migrate to cloud, that time you no need to do those kind of fixtures. I think nowadays we have a very convenient way. Control 1 you directly do and it will happen automatically, but to make sure why to write those kind of, you will during your migration you will get lot of less etc check now and onwards if you make sure whatever you are writing your code, that is cloud compatible or not. So again, these all are the things, but here I have to use because we are working in BTP. But in this case I will pass the parameter. In the parameter, for passing the parameter, I forgot to show you in this all the things what all are the interface. We have only the keys. So what we have to do, we have to loop through these keys. We will be having the travel ID basically. So we have to loop through these keys, and all the travel IDs which you are getting in this log object, we have to log all the things. So we have to use loop 8 control space loop at assigning. Okay, let me do control space loop at assigning keys table, delete control space, I can do keys table, and field symbol I will declare the assigning field symbol. ls keys I can do ls key, and inside this I will call this particular object control X, control V, and shift F1. And one more thing we have to do, let me do one thing. We have to pass this value obviously, so we have to pass the value operator, and inside this, if you see, this is the table, there is a name value pair. We have to pass what is the parameter name. In my case, this is the travel ID is the parameter name. You can see from your here also, and you can copy this one, control C. This is the travel ID, to make sure you're not doing any mistake. So this is your name, parameter name, and value you have to pass with the reference control space you can do. And that is very important thing. You have to pass the reference of the value instead of passing the direct value, and that you will get control Z, that you will get in the ls key, the travel ID you have to pass basically in the control V space travel ID. And once you pass this parameter, again it is asked for the try catch block. You can do control 1 surround by the try catch block to handle this all the things. And there are two exceptions, so we have to handle if foreign log, if somebody already logged, we have to give the obviously error message. So this should be handled into lr log something, lr fo log something, you can give some object name. And there is second catch which also you need to handle, that you can handle in this control C, same into control V. Here we have to declare into data because we are doing inline, so we have to declare this one, and shift F1 control F3. So you can remove now these two things. Now once you have implemented this one, you have to obviously pass those messages back to the if you see the parameter here F2 interface here, you can have failed and reported parameter which needs to fill, and you have to pass back. To fill the messages, we will use our same message map_message method, and here we will pass the travel ID. Obviously we will be having the travel ID. Travel ID we will be having here in the keys, control C, and messages we will be not having. In this case we have to construct the message table because we don't have the object now, so we will be passing those all the data. Message ID we have to pass. So if you see, we have already a classical message table for the demo. I already noted down. Let me give this one control C. This is the classical. I will show you. Control C to do control shift A, control shift A, control V, and if you open this one, so we already have the message number. Which message number? 32. So we have the 32 number message. If you see here, travel is logged by the user. Travel and travel ID is logged by the user. So this message I want to utilize, so I can pass the message ID and other thing. So what I can do, so message ID will be this one, obviously means message class. And once we have message ID, other things also I can pass. Apart from message ID, we have the message type, control G, control space. Message type should be error, and message number also we have to pass obviously. Control space you can do message number, we have 32 032 032, and last thing we have to pass the message variants, or we can say message variables. First we have to pass the I think first what we have to pass, first thing we have to pass the travel ID is logged by this particular guy. So first we have to pass the travel ID. Alt back, this is the travel ID. We can pass control C, Control V, and second thing we have to pass, second variable we have to pass the username that we will get from this one. Control C, Control V. If you see this object, we will be having user name. Shift F1, and a failed and reported structure we have to get. If you do F2 over here and failed, Control C, you can get from here failed and reported. So what you have to do, failed travel in this case, and reported also you can get. Control C, Control V. This time we don't need to get this particular it got failed or not, because we have filled all the messages. Let me activate this one. Control F3. I think with that we have done the implementation with our lock object. Let me try to test this lock object, how it is working. To do that, I have put the breakpoint. Let me refresh my application and click on go button. It will trigger the breakpoint. Obviously we have already breakpoint on the authority check. Let me do F8, and once it is done, let me go one of the first travel instance. Let me do F8 and click on edit button. Till now the lock object method is not triggered. Let me Technomaniac and click on save button. Now if I do F8, the lock object method is got triggered. So it will get the lock instance LR or LOCK object. Let me F6. Okay, I got the dump. What is the issue? LO lock fail. Let me open this one. Let me see the messages. Deep messages are there. T01. Message ID is LA and object type text and object name. Okay, LA message ID 000. Let me open the message ID LA. Control Shift A. LA 000 message is the message number. The use of 1 and 2 is not permitted. Object type text and object name is not permitted. Okay, it's telling that this is not. Okay, got it. The issue is that, so we have to pass here this, not the demo travel name, we have to pass the object name. So let me change this one. Copy this demo e-travel and this name, not that one. Control C, and let me go last edited position, which is not available, I think so. So let me go up little bit, and instead of passing that, I have to pass this one and activate my code. Control V. So this is the use of the dump. If you would have given the appropriate message, but this is not the then you would have not got dump. Control F3, and if I do F8 now, obviously I will get the dump. You can see close, and since I have fixed this dump, let me go to ABAP perspective. I pass the table name instead of the lock object. Here I have to pass the lock object. So what I will do, let me do Control F3 one more time. We have the breakpoint. Let me go to this application, come back, refresh my application because I have changed something in my code, and let me click on one more time go button. It will trigger the breakpoint. Let me do F8, come back to and click here. It will trigger again breakpoint. Let me do F8 and click on edit button, and this time again I will change to the Technomaniac and try to save this one. And this time again it call this one F8. Lock object got triggered, but this time I think we got the lock entry. F6, and it will be locked. I know, because let me do lock F6. We didn't get the any error message and it got logged now. Now let me open the other session. Let me open the ABAP perspective for meanwhile and open this one more session and try to preview the application, another session, and there also I will try to log again. I will go click on go button. Again this debugger will trigger another thing, so that is fine. This time I think on this one, let me do, this is AND loop, not this one, give me 1 second, this debugger will trigger JV. Let me do F8. This got terminated, but this is active. There is multiple debugger we are working with. It is the advantage of Eclipse. So let me click on this one. No. Let me come back. Let me do F8 here first. I have to come back. I have to open first one only. I opened second one. Let me remove this breakpoint from here because I don't want to trigger this gate authorization again and again. Let me do F8. Come to the ABAP perspective, click on edit button. Try to change something. Take one something and click on save button. Again it will trigger the second debugger. I will try to get the lock reference, obviously I will get, but when I do this one, try to lock the object, it will have some error. It caused the error and we got the message. If I do F8 and if I do F8, you can see the travel is locked by this particular user. So this is the advantage of the lock object. Because you are editing here, you can't do the editing here. So this is how the lock objects work. We have completed the update, read and the lock method implementation. Now we will see during the update what all are the method will be called and in which sequence it will be called. To see that, we have this screenshot. As soon as you click on save button after the update, the first method will be called global authorization implementation that we already have seen. After that, if you define some global feature control, that will be called. After that, if you have defined some lock implementation, in our case we have defined the lock implementation, that is the reason this method for lock got called and we have implemented this method as well. In managed scenario, the lock will be managed by the framework. So execute managed lock will be called this, whatever you will see in this different color. So this color will be implemented by the framework. One more thing, in managed scenario, also you can do the unmanaged lock. For that, you have to define in the behavior definition, like we are defining unmanaged save, same way we have to define unmanaged lock as well along with your implementation time. So managed with unmanaged save with unmanaged lock. In that case, in managed scenario also you can handle your lock by your own. For that, in managed scenario also you have to implement the method for lock if you are defining the unmanaged lock. So this is very important thing for the lock. Once lock is done, this lock scenario didn't trigger during the creation time, because creation time in the database there is no entry itself what you will lock. So updation time this particular lock will trigger. Once as soon as you have done the lock thing, everything is okay, then second thing, if you are calling this particular OData service is a OData, or you are doing the OData consumption, there is the two way you can call this particular BO update operation. One way through the OData service, another way through the EML statement. If you are doing through the OData service, that time this ETAg also will be called, ETAg method will be called. For the ETAg method, as I told you, we need to implement the read method as well. If you don't implement the read method, ETAg will not work properly. In case of managed scenario, that read implementation done by the managed framework, you no need to worry. But in unmanaged scenario, you have to implement this read method if you want that your read should work. That is the very important thing. We have seen these things. If we didn't implement the read, we were getting the dump. Once the after lock and ETAg is evaluated, these all are the methods which we have seen in create scenario also. The pre-checks of the projection layer, then augmentation method, the pre-checks of the interface layer, then authority check method, and the instance feature control which you have defined in your behavior definition. For that each and everything we have the methods, and these methods will be called one by one in this same sequence. Everything you are getting passed through this all the methods and it didn't get fail, then it will trigger the update. Finally, if you are having the unmanaged scenario, it will trigger modify method. If you are having the managed scenario, it will trigger the managed update. If you have in the managed update, if you have in the managed scenario, if you define the determinations, those will, during the transactional phase, those also will be triggered in case of managed scenario. In unmanaged scenario, only one method will trigger, which will be the method for update. There only you have to do the determination as well along with the update. Once everything is done, this is the transactional phase is over, then your save sequence will be triggered directly in case of the OData, and in case of you call this particular BO through the EML commit, entities will be triggered or rollback will be triggered. In case of rollback, cleanup will happen. In case of the commit entity also, that the save sequence will be triggered. Once the save sequence will be triggered, these are the 5 methods is there: finalize, save, and the clear. These 5 methods will be triggered, which I have explained in my previous video. And once everything is okay, then one OData call will be triggered from backend to read back the data whatever we have updated, and we will read back and the response will be sent to the front end back. This is how the update operation runtime is happening. So if we didn't implemented each and every method, but if you are seeing where it is called exactly, and this is the sequence it is called, and it will be very helpful also when you are doing the real-time implementation. With that, we have completed this update, read and lock operation. In my next video, we will do the create by association, read by association, and delete operation as well. Before going to that video, like this video, subscribe this channel. Whatever you are feeling about that, write it down in comment section, and share also this video wherever the ABAP community is there. With that, thank you and happy learning.